Just check. Right. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our impromptu, very quick live stream. Sorry, got a message last minute, which I had to quickly deal with.
Hello, Warren.
Hello, Warren. Warren Morgan is just joining us, who is a former mayor and Labour Party and Change UK activist in Brighton, and he will be involved in our discussion. This was set up quite impromptu with regards to the fact that on Wednesday, as many of you know, there was a terrorist attack on Capitol Hill. There was left 4 people dead, including a police officer who was beaten to death, effectively beaten to death. He died in hospital a while later with a fire extinguisher. And Trump is seen by many, including us, let's be honest, as inciting this. So what Warren, Rachel and I will be discussing this evening will be the attack on the Capitol, the role of Donald Trump and those around him who may or may not have been involved in incitement, how Congress have reacted, and where Trump is now, impeachment, possibility of the 25th Amendment, which is now unlikely, but it will be mentioned. And I'm sorry we've gone straight into it, Warren. As I said to our viewers, we've literally, I had a last minute message and everything was happening at once. So there we go.
Welcome.
Welcome.
How are you?
Thank you. Good, thanks. How are you?
We are fine.
Still recovering from Wednesday, I have to say. It really badly affected me. And it's really weird for something not in my country to,
It was
quite shaken.
Neither of us could sleep and went to bed that evening because it was just, yeah.
I was up all night, and I think as I tweeted, when I stood on that spot under the Capitol Dome, nearly 30 years ago, I couldn't have imagined seeing what I saw on Wednesday. It was just appalling, really.
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah. What's your experience of the security at the Capitol? I mean, can you work out geographically how they got in?
Really trying to remember going in, which route I took to get in. And as I say, it's 30 years ago, and my clear memories of that visit were, as I say, being in the rotunda under the dome, right. and being in the galleries of both chambers, and looking down as the journalists and people that were trapped in those galleries looked down onto the floor of the House. And I don't really remember what the security was. I guess there were these sort of old style airport metal detectors, but of course this is all pre 9/11. It was in the very early days of the Clinton presidency, and I think I would hope that the security would be tighter there. I mean, comparing it to the security at Parliament, how that changed from when I first went there in the late 80s to my
Yeah,
most recent visit, I guess in about
I've thought a lot
2014,
about
15.
that. I mean,
It was
I've only really been in Parliament. I think the first time I went into Parliament was maybe 2009. And so I've only ever known the airport security that you go through.
Mm.
And I can't imagine if you were going to do the same thing to the Houses of Parliament, how you would do it and how you would get in.
I do know. Let's bear in
Mm.
mind. Sorry, Rachel. I first went in 2000, 2001. No, it's 2000 the first time, and I've seen security in the House of Parliament tighten over 20 years. I remember when Otis Ferry and several others in the Countryside Alliance disgracefully barged into the Commons chamber in 2004. Security went up. I remember when they had those protesters, was it Families for Justice or something?
Fathers for Justice. I think it was
Fathers
Fathers for Justice.
Yeah, who threw this powder that people were terrified could be anthrax from the gallery. That will, when you had glass protection around the Commons gallery after that. So security has improved. I think it's inevitable. Security will grow in the in the congressional building. But
well,
they're
those
building a wall.
hearings
I
are
heard
going to
that they're-
start fairly imminently. I hear on the
Yeah.
inquiry.
I think they're building a wall, ironically, round the Capitol.
But I did hear the National Guard are going to be there until inauguration day at least, and that's something. But yeah, I'm still in shock. I think
There's another demonstration apparently planned for the 17th. But in terms of the National Guard being there, that's one of the very big questions about Wednesday, in terms of when were the National Guard, the various units from the states around District of Columbia, mobilized? On whose say-so were they mobilized? Did Trump approve it, as he has to, be it being the sort of federal capital, or did he delay? And was it Pence rather who gave that final authorization? And why was it such a kind of slow response?
It is the implication, and I've got to be careful here that I'm not, prejudicing myself, but is the implication or the allegation that he deliberately delayed the National Guard or stopped the National Guard because he actually wanted them to storm the Capitol, which would be incredibly serious if that is the allegation that is found to be true.
And that's potentially one of the two big charges against him.
Yes.
One is the incitement at the rally at the Ellipse earlier in the afternoon, and two is what was his role in preventing sufficient security forces from reaching there. Did he give the okay to the FBI SWAT teams to go in as quickly as he could have done? Was the police tactic, once the perimeter had been breached, to deal with it in a very kind of relaxed, laid back way? I suspect not, given that their own number, as you say, were suffering some pretty horrific injuries, and that the second, third, and fourth in line to the presidency were all under direct threat as that mob was going around the building, and that's why
they were after Pence.
one of them was shot and sadly killed.
Yeah, they were after Pence, weren't they? They were
after Pence, and I think that I suspect, given Pelosi's office and what happened there, they're after Nancy Pelosi as well.
Well, they erected a gallows outside. They were shouting "Hang Pelosi."
I didn't know that.
They were after
No, I did see the gallows, but I thought the gallows were not. I didn't realize the gallows was in Washington. I thought I'd seen it in a different city. But yeah, I mean, the rhetoric surrounding it, 1776, the American Revolution. There was a really funny comment from one woman who had obviously got been bashed by a police officer, and she was complaining that about the way that she'd been treated, and she was like going, we were just wanting a revolution. It's like, I think it was Stephen Colbert who said, revolutionaries have their head chopped off. What? They don't complain. They don't complain.
Well, yeah, as so many people, including Joe Biden, have said, if she and the others doing it had been black, there were no black faces that I saw joining that insurrection, that insurgency. They would not have got away with bloodied face. It would have been dealt with a lot more harshly, I'm sure.
I just find it incredible. I'm about to lose a friendship with the token Trump supporter on Facebook, who I hoped would one day see the light, and he's effectively been making excuses the last 2 days, and I've had enough, so I'm going to unfriend him after this.
What I find very disturbing, I mean, I'm thinking back to like life before social media, and like the ability of social media to kind of spread things and spread lies and spread misinformation, such that millions of people genuinely believe something that is demonstrably false, I think is a real threat to our world. And millions of people thought the election was stolen. And yes, that was because of leading politicians, but it's also because of misinformation. And also I find that when you engage with people, like if on the one hand you have a court reaching a certain decision, but people find information to the contrary on Facebook, what I find absolutely baffling is that people consider information found on Facebook to be more credible than the decision of a court. And so I do think, it's very strange.
It's from that conspiratorial mindset that says anything or anyone in an official position is there to pull the wool over your eyes, to give you fake news, false information, and that it's only the people who are on these Facebook groups, who are speaking through outlets like Fox News or OANN and Breitbart and some of the other websites who are speaking the real truth. And in that way, their sphere of information, their community closes, and that's, you will have seen people like, I think it was the woman that was sadly killed, went from being an Obama voter in 2008 to believing these QAnon theories, and ending up in a situation where she's shot trying to get at the Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's extraordinary, really poisoned the minds of some people.
Basically, we're not fighting an extremist political party, not even an extremist political party. We're fighting a dangerous cult.
But what I find disturbing is that when you get into arguments with people, you are not discussing values, you're not discussing policy, you're discussing reality. What you disagree with is the truth of the thing that happened. And actually I find that really hard to engage with, and the certainty that people have that the information that they have is obviously more correct than any contrary information that you might have. Absolute certainty.
I know. I mean, let's kind of move on from here. What happened, I think we all accept that Trump is to what degree will be a legal discussion in the weeks and months to come, because I think Trump will have this over him for the rest of his life now, one way or another. But what do you think is very likely to happen over the next 12 days, bearing in mind a week is more than a lifetime in politics, and only 4 days ago our main worry was Georgia? How do you fix it? The way things seem to be panning out now, how do you see it?
I'm trying to read the clues around what night with Trump's second video message. So in the first message, he said to his message to the people that stormed the Capitol were that we love you and we respect you, and it was, you know, this isn't over, our fight's only just beginning. And then there was that very scripted and much more apologetic kind of statement that he put out last night that a lot of the QAnon MAGA people have reacted very badly to. Now, what led him to that statement? Has Mike Pence said to him, either you go quietly now or it's the 25th Amendment, which will be very difficult to do given that some of the cabinet secretaries who would have had to join in that have gone, or has Trump really had a change of heart? I don't believe that for a second. So is he now more fearful of the kind of legal action that will come afterwards? Can he pardon himself? The advice from the White House counsel's office back in '73 for Nixon was that under the rule that someone can't be their own judge, is that the president can't. But that's been debated. Has Pence offered him a pardon if he resigns? I don't think that's going to happen. The probably be certain of is that the Republicans in the House, the Democrats rather in the House, will table articles of impeachment probably on Monday. That is unlikely to lead to his early removal before his term ends in 10 or 12 days time, but it would disbar him from future office. And I think certainly from that first video message, he seemed fairly intent on announcing his intention to run in 2024. So obviously there are concerns even from Nancy Pelosi, having spoken to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff earlier on about whether Trump might launch military action, even nuclear military action. And I think he's been ramping things up in Iran for some time. The temptation for him to launch a military conflict that Biden would have to deal with is probably quite high. Whether that would get through the Department of Defense, back to the question of who's running the Department of Defense. You've got acting people there, Trump placed people that have been put in place. So it's a real mystery as to where Trump is and who is controlling him or what is motivating him at this point. I don't see him just sailing through the next 10 days and going off to play golf and that's the end of it. He's got something in mind, but he may be being restrained by somebody.
The two things have come to mind in your answers there. One is, why do you think the two cabinet members resigned? Two, with regards to defense, my understanding is that during the situation on Wednesday, the Pentagon got hold of Mike Pence, Nancy Pelosi, and I think someone else, and consulted with them and not Donald Trump. Taking that for the moment as that is what happened, do you think the Pentagon and those in the Department of Defense will bypass Trump and those who are known to be exceptionally close to him and talk to those who are further along the ladder? They would rather talk to Pence and they'll probably and Pelosi rather than talk to.
I would hope, and that short of any sudden and immediate threat to the United States, that any military action would have to go through a number of other people, despite the fact that Trump is still until midday on the 20th the commander-in-chief, that there would be enough enough of a break on him to prevent anything serious from happening. However, if people were to test the defenses of the US or their allies around the world, and it's always a risky time at the transition of power, then the opportunity might be there for Trump to do something. And I think Iran is the big flashpoint.
Yeah, it's
But he would need the backing of the military. I mean, can he just order them, or can the military say we're not doing it? I know he tried to. Didn't he try to like replace all the military with his yes men or something?
he tried to.
He replaced the entire civilian leadership of
Mm.
Department of Defense, yes,
Yeah.
with people from his own office, from his own campaign team. He can't really replace the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and hopefully they would find a way of blocking it. If you've read Jonathan Friedland's book To Kill a President, the first chapter of that is the president, who is Trump but is never named as Trump in the book, waking up in a rage one night and back on North Korea, and that has troubled me ever since I read it. But the Defense Department found the way of blocking that at the last minute, and I would hope that there's some way of doing that if it came to it.
Yeah. The founding fathers of the United States never really saw this kind of thing. They expected tyrants and demagogues, but not in the way it's all. But then there was not 24-hour instant culture.
No, and even the 25th Amendment, which potentially he could be removed, one of the most recent 20th century amendments, really never foresaw a Donald Trump with an insurrectionist movement from within the United States itself, and having to prove mental incapacity. I think they thought much more about physical incapacity through illness or injury, rather than various people, including Trump's own niece, have given pronouncements on his mental state. And I'm not a psychologist, so I won't do that. But that's they're going to have to review all of this, I think, and put in place safeguards for any future president.
Yeah, I was going to say. Going back again, the two cabinet members who resigned, Nancy DeVos and
Transport Secretary
Betsy DeVos, Education, and Nancy Chow,
that's it.
Transport, and the wife of Mitch McConnell.
Yes.
So whether her position, I think once Mitch had made his break with Donald Trump, I think she really had to go anyway. What their motivation is, maybe they just didn't want to be part of that discussion around whether they wanted to earn their place in history as being the ones that walked away from it. Whether it was a print decision, having seen what happened, who knows?
You think they were frightened of the consequences?
They would have to speak.
Sorry, you were still talking there, didn't we? What was your last sentence?
No. Or whether it was just principles on their part, having seen what happened and saying we can't. And obviously they were out of those positions in 12 days anyway. It may have been a mixture of all three.
It does seem that kind of the quote unquote traditional conservatives within the Republican Party, actually a lot of them were really shaken by what happened. And I find that, I get it, because like there is not just in Congress, but more broadly. But on the other hand, I want to ask, did they not see it coming? I found the capitulation of, I suppose, more decent conservatives within the Republican Party quite disappointing over the last 4 years. And I suppose, sorry, Warren, were you going to say something?
I think it's a sort of fundamental question for the Republican Party, and it's one that has got huge parallels both in the Labour Party and the Conservative Party here, where in the Republican Party at the moment, you've got probably a majority still on in Congress who are the kind of rule of law, institution, kind of fiscal conservative, old style Republicans. But the membership of the Republican Party has shifted fundamentally towards this sort of ethno nationalist, populist, QAnon believing membership. 75% of them polled, even since Wednesday, support Trump, support what happened. And obviously, to get selected and elected, those Republican representatives have to follow the membership, or they will get primaried, or deselected, as we call it over here. So it's very much a parallel with, in the Conservative Party, those MPs that didn't go along with Brexit were removed. In the Labour Party, those people that didn't go along with Corbyn were pushed out. So it is that split. Now, whether you'll see the Republican Party split with people like the Lincoln Project, and people who write for the Bulwark and some of those other, more traditional conservatives, whether they will split into a new movement, who knows? It's one of the big questions to come out of all this is how much will Trump's movement and all of the sort of right-wing militia groups and others that go along with it, how much will they stick with the Republican Party, form their own movement that Trump will lead? Will there be civil war in the Republican Party over the next 2 to 4 years? Hopefully giving the Democrats a sort of clear run to build on their slimmest of slim majorities in both houses and hold on to the presidency. We'll have to see.
I think that I've always I think I'm learning I'm quite naive in that I kind of trust the common decency of ordinary people.
I think we're all naive on that.
And what I've learned during the Trump presidency is that maybe the ordinary population aren't as commonly decent as I had assumed that they were. And I in the way that I would have thought that most normal law-abiding Americans would be utterly horrified and terrified of what happened at the Capitol, and that would put them off ever voting for anything like Trump ever again. And what I've learned is that at least half of Republican members actually supported the coup, and I'm thinking, is humanity basically barbarian? We don't live. Those basic assumptions about normal people, ordinary people, are just not there anymore.
I think the late the 2000s, with people in power like Tony Blair, like Bill Clinton, like Barack Obama, I think we possibly got a little complacent around populism and nationalism. I think post the 2008 crash, the scope for populist movements to come up and scapegoat others. In the case of the United States, it's the left, the socialists. In our country, it's been the European. It's in the Labour Party, it was anti-Semitism. It's there has been aggression back to, I think, some of those prejudices that we'd probably hoped that we'd left behind, and the sort of progressive politics that we saw in the 90s and the 2000s that we had, and clearly we haven't. And every time there is a serious economic downturn, you do see these sort of populist leaders who will unite their supporters against a sort of phantom enemy. You do see them pop up. It happened in the 1920s and 1930s. It's happened again now. Hopefully we can return to what we had 10, 15 years ago without the shock of a major conflict as we did in the 1940s.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Warren. Sometimes I think I'm still in a mild degree of shock as to what we've
I
gone
mean,
through.
I was quite frightened by the rhetoric of those protesters. They were talking about 1776 and they were talking about civil war. And somebody put a meme up this morning, and it was about that in 1923, Hitler had a failed coup, but in 1932, he was successful. And Rachel Maddow did a bit of a skit that I saw, that she was saying that actually in many ways it was successful because they moved the boundaries of what was acceptable in politics. And now that they've made it acceptable to question the legitimacy of results. They've made it acceptable, or they've made it possible to attempt the kind of things that were attempted on Wednesday. They all Trump's horrendousness has now become mainstreams. And is it going to be a case that, I mean, and even articles, all this, I mean, I worry that if whatever one side does, the other side then is able to do. So we have to pass they have to pass Article 25 to get Amendment 25 to get rid of Trump. So then there's a push to pass Amendment 25 to get rid of Joe Biden because they think that he's got Alzheimer's. And now is it, at every election, is there going to be just like massive chaos because nobody's going to trust the result?
Yes, sorry.
And then everything spirals out of control, and then there actually is a civil war.
I think. Could I just add to that? I think it's and it adds to the thing, and this is the one thing that gives me hope. Where Joe Biden talks about wanting to reach out, and I think it's important for both sides to try and start to reach out to each other. That I think you've got a problem where there are people on both right and left who see themselves as Americans and the true Americans, and the rest as other, who will either they step in line or they will be shoved aside, and they need to go beyond that as a country. And I think that kind of attitude, which we see to a certain extent here, needs to change. But that's just my addition to what Rachel said.
I don't know how we get back to that kind of post-war consensus with, as you say, the social media environment. People don't have that consensus around where their information comes from. I mean, we always had it with to a varying degree with the press in this country, but when you only had 3 news channels and 4 or 5 major newspapers, you could choose your media to an extent, but not like you can now. And you can choose your media to the extent that you get it solely from a blog run by 3 people, in the wilds of Georgia, which has there's no constraints on what they say, and they can portray anything as truth. Started in the last 6 years with Donald Trump. You go right back to the 90s with the impeachment of Bill Clinton, pursued by Lindsey Graham, who was complaining today about setting a precedent with impeaching Donald Trump for a second time over and promoting an insurrection, which is crazy. But you go back to that time, and you had Rush Limbaugh and Newt Gingrich and the Tea Party, and there's been a progression through there to the kind of birtherism around Obama, those kind of conspiracy theories that have opened the way for all of this kind of QAnon kind of and of course the problem is in the States that they all own these one of the vans outside of the Capitol building was found to have an AR-15 assault rifle in it, as well as bomb making equipment. So had they been able to get their weapons in, and nearly all of those people, I would imagine, own several weapons, as has been seen in Facebook clips of certainly one of the ones that died, massive assault weapons. It could have been a lot worse in terms of what they were able to do.
Oh yeah, it could have been. It could have been much worse, and it could have succeeded. I mean, if enough people had got in there with guns, they could have shot the whole of Congress. They could have shot the whole of the Senate, and then the whole thing would have been closed down, and Donald Trump could have stayed as president. Like it. All of those worst case scenarios could very well have happened, and maybe for all the police's failures, they were able to bring it to an end. I mean, obviously after several hours, but it could have. I mean, and if bombs
don't forget.
Off, then...
Sorry, Warren, you were about to say.
Don't forget what the plan was in Michigan. At the Michigan state legislature, they were going to occupy the legislature, take all of the lawmakers hostage, put the governor on trial. They were going to zip tie all of the legislators, and they had zip ties with them on Wednesday, and execute them one by one. And I think that's a perfectly plausible scenario, is that they would have taken hostages and executed them unless Donald Trump was allowed to remain president.
I think the high commendation should be given to the security inside the Capitol and their very quick thinking, even down to the two congressional assistants, or the Senate assistants, who had the presence of mind to grab the vote tallies and walk with them. It's. What do you think will post January the 20th? Let's assume the next 12 days Trump's hardly able to do anything these out. His problems will have just begun, won't they? Do you think he will end up do you think history will be absolutely brutal towards him compared to Nixon?
It'll be, well, they say history's written by but that may have been true in the past, but now history will be written by the same people that put Trump in office, as well as those who've condemned him. So I think there will always be people that believe that Trump was the person that was there to free America from the yoke of whatever yoke they think is preventing the people from getting their way. I think mainstream opinion, mainstream history will view him as by far the worst, by far the most dangerous. I think we have probably escaped if he does nothing else in the next 10 days. I was convinced in 2016 that we would not get through the 4 years without potentially some major conflict, something going horribly wrong. If this week is the worst of it, it's bad, it's terrible, it creates a huge precedent, it's a huge worry, but it is not conflict on a massive scale. It's not nuclear war. It's you can look at it from two different sides, I think.
Where do you see as the things we can be hopeful about in the future? What do you see as?
It's very difficult. I mean, obviously, you are going to have the downside of winning those 2 seats in Georgia is that the progressives in the Democratic caucus are going to be pushing Biden's administration to go a lot further than certainly many of the Republicans will want to go, and that will add fuel to the QAnon Trump movement in terms of these are communists coming to take your guns and strip your freedoms, etc., etc. So Biden's got an immensely difficult task. He's got a bigger and more difficult task than I think any of his 45 predecessors in firstly dealing with the pandemic, second, dealing with this huge schism between kind of rural conservative America and urban liberal progressive America, and finding some common ground between the two, and pulling the country back from the brink of some serious division. So I don't envy him his task. I think, you know, for a man of his age, it's going to be immensely stressful. He's certainly not going to be able to serve 2 full terms. So you're going to have a Democratic Party that is looking for, you know, someone who isn't Biden, but it's him, or someone. It's very difficult, very interesting 4 years coming up.
Yes.
Because I mean, like, we have to be realistic. It's not like on the 20th of January, you know, the sun comes up and everything's hunky-dory, because those people are still going to be there, and there's still going to be 75 million people who think you know, the election didn't go right. Those rioters, there's still going to be people trying, and so all of those problems are going to continue. And that is going to be a real challenge. I mean, I have to say that with a narrow majority, and not even really majority in the Senate, in both houses, I see what you mean about the progressives kind of pushing things, but actually they're not going to get anything through because the majorities are so narrow. So isn't that going to like help Biden, or is it that basically the progressives are going to say, well, we're not going to vote for you, and then if you don't support A, B, and C, so therefore Biden will lose votes? Like they will use the small majority to wield more power.
Well, they will say that that more progressive candidates are needed to win that majority in the midterms in 2022.
Right.
Others will urge, you know, more of a return to the centre. So you'll have these kind of conflicts in both of the major parties there. You know, between the sort of the Trumpists and the more kind of McConnell, Romney Republicans, and then you'll have the kind of AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ilhan, kind of wing of the Democrats versus, you know, the Bidens and others. Where that leaves Kamala Harris, who knows? I have a big fear, as you say, with that many people, all of them gun owners, that there are going to be a person who they see as the illegitimate president out. That's always a risk with any president, but I think it's heightened with Biden in a way that it wasn't even true for Obama. So it's yeah.
It is certainly going to be difficult, but at least with the trifecta, you know, Biden has power. I was really concerned that if he didn't get the Senate, he would essentially be a lame duck, because I didn't see any of those Republicans wanting to work with him at all. Because even people like Mitt Romney, for all he's like Mr. Sensible, is kind of really conservative, you know?
At least with that casting vote from Kamala Harris, that gives Romney and some of the others, the people like Ben Sass, the space to be a bit more of a sort of compromising centrist grouping within the Senate. it will obviously make it easier for Biden to get all of his appointees through, and it probably made a difference in the nomination of someone like Merrick Garland as Attorney General. So, he won't have those confirmation battles that he would have had. He will have legislative back because the AOCs and Elizabeth Warrens and others will want to tag on things to bills, and the Republicans will want to block it, and one or two sort of more conservative Democrats who may not support some of the things that happen. So it's not going to be easy. There's always that thing of if you have a thumping parliamentary majority, you end up in battles with your own side over legislation as much. So I think Biden is nothing but a seasoned congressional leader. He spent 30 plus years in the Senate, so he knows how things work. He knows he can get things through. So that's he's probably the best person for that. He's good at making deals. He's got some good personal relationships with people across the aisle. He was well respected by people like John McCain, good friends with him. So he is not of the liberal left in the Democratic Party that means that those Republicans aren't going to talk to him, aren't going to deal with him.
It's the next few years are going to be crucial, clearly. Do you think there will be a resurgence towards centrism by the end of the decade, both in the US and the UK, actually?
I would hope so. I think the sort of social media environment, the news environment, makes that difficult. I think people like drama and conflict, and they don't want dull politics. Well, some people don't want dull politics. I think I was reading something today where it is a good thing if people don't know who their politicians are, because bad things are not happening, and no one's really that interested in things ticking over quite well. So I would hope that people will look at the success of politicians like Jacinda Ardern in New Zealand and go, that's the kind of thing that we want to get back to. The legacy of Barack Obama. It's surprising that people aren't more wistful for his 8 years in office. It's good to have Tony Blair still speaking the kind of voice of reason on things like the pandemic from time to time as well. So I don't see where that is going to come from. I've got high hopes for people like Keir Starmer. So yeah, I hope we'll have learned the lessons from the more populist movements, whether that's sort of Brexit and Boris or Trump or Corbynism. The worst extremes of Corbynism, but we will see the social media and competing news environment kind of mitigates against that, and we've got GB News starting up in the UK, which we don't need a Fox News network here. That's not going to be a good recipe, but we'll see.
Okay, it's coming up to 10:02 now, and I think we've covered all we'll have to, Warren. But as you know, but also for some of our viewers, I initially invited Warren before I invited him for this to a discussion on the start of the Biden presidency in 12 days, which will be in 12 days' time. That's still going ahead with a few more guests. And Warren will hopefully be there as this, and hopefully we'll have a bit more of a positive discussion than seem. But thank you for coming here, and I hope you have a good weekend, and everything will be. Hopefully, this is the start of the long road back to politics.
Normalcy.
Well, normalcy. But I will leave with a.
Let's hope so.
Let's hope so. But I will leave you a word which a quote. I was reminded that the price of peace is eternal vigilance, and I think those of us on the centre ground will end up never being quite so complacent again. I think we'll always be that little bit wary from now on.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, thank you,
Thank
Warren.
you.
Absolutely.